everybody. Hope you're all having a good Saturday. I've got most of the lights off today. I'm feeling kind of laid back and just kind of take it easy. So, hope my vibe matches your vibe. Hope everyone's had a good week. Playing this SG for the past 2 days. I was on a Strat kick. Before that, I was on a Tele kick, and then I spent a lot of time with the 335. It's nice to have options, and taking time off from one model makes me fall in love with it again when I revisit it, as opposed to just spending all my time with one guitar and actually learning how to play, because I'm one of those people. I think most of you can relate. Let's see. All right, Vinicius has got an SG issue. We'll get you, Vinny, if I can call you Vinny. I don't know if that is a thing in Portugal. Here, you're a damn Vinny. All right, let's see. Any questions before Sebastian BC77s? Yeah, okay. There's one from Matthew Finn. Oh, no, okay. It just changed the sequence. All right, sorry. The stuff that was done before the chat started, some of it doesn't appear, and some of it appears out of sequence. And I try to answer these in the order asked out of fairness. There are two questions before, for like 2 hours before the chat started that have disappeared. One was from a Per, I believe, in Switzerland. And I don't remember the question. And the other one, I don't remember who asked it, but was asking, I think Matt Ben Per asking about equivalents to Friedman and Sir in Europe, and whether or not, what to recommend. I think that was one guy, and the next guy is asking about the Marshall Albion amp, and whether, or Astoria, not Albion, sorry, Astoria. And I don't have any experience with the Marshall Astoria. I believe that Paul Cook had one and sold it. I don't know whether he found it faulty or whether it just wasn't the thing he needed it to be. The sad thing is that Marshall should be the Marshall of Europe. I've heard good things about Cornford. I don't know if anyone in any techs in Europe want to say whether that's good or bad, but I just don't have a lot of experience with European market amps that are not also here. I know an awful lot of people have been happy with various, what are they called? The one with all the brouhaha earlier this year about who owns it with the guys at Anderton's. Those little lunchbox amps. Someone's got to know. I don't remember. Let me see if I scroll down. No one's answered that. Most of them are lunchboxes. Victory amps. That's it. Anyway, let me get to the questions that are here now. And then I want to talk about some channel stuff and about some using a vintage Fender with different guitars kind of stuff. And some of you already know this. Some others will find this, very much a game-changing thing. And what you were just hearing was the SG straight into that almost done 65 Super Reverb of recent video fame. Hey, Sebastian. Actually, I'm going to change the order. I'm going to do it in the order you asked him. Lake of Constance, Germany. Well, guten Tag to you, Sebastian. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And why did I use actually had a question before. Here's the first one you had. Would you mind talking about your solid-state rectification concept? What's the intention behind putting 1 nanofarad caps in parallel with the diodes? Don't you get AC bleed? It's a little bit complicated, and you might want to read some actual chapters on how this stuff works. I would recommend the valvewizard.co.uk. He's got some sections on this. Basically, those are snubber caps. What they do is they take some of the high end off. And so you don't get the little spiky bits that you can get with just a diode. And the reason I paused there was I got a text in that I did not expect to get. I forgot to turn my phone fully into airplane mode, and that was a buddy, Hal Hawkins, asking if he could drop his deluxe reverb by at 5. I will text him during the next break. So those are called snubber caps. Some amps have them. Many Marshalls do have them. Many amps don't. Twin Reverbs don't have them. And some Marshalls don't have those, but they have giant 220 microfarad, 220 nanofarad caps, rather, across each AC secondary to ground. There are various ways to do that. They don't let AC bleed through so much as you think. It's a complicated thing. It's about to what the voltage, what the diode looks like to the voltage versus what the capacitor looks like to the voltage. But without having graphs and stuff available, I can't really get into more than that. But on the EZ81 and the first Excalibur, why did I use one client wish when I used the same circuit values for GZ34? I used the EZ81 on that first one because it was easier to build because I was using an off-the-shelf chassis. Subsequent ones will not have the EZ81. I'm doing a rectification emulation, rather a tube rectification emulation using solid state in subsequent models. And by choosing resistors and all that fun stuff, I can emulate the voltage drop and the feel difference between an EZ81 and a 5U4 and a GZ34 and not have something drawing a lot of current from the power supply. Let's see. I think that's all from Sebastian so far. Matthew Finn has a question. Replacement speakers for a 67 Pro Reverb. Yeah, well, I think a lot of the replacement speakers on the market will sound better than Utahs. I'm not a huge fan of the Utahs. They are, they are what they are, and they are a particular vintage sound, but they're kind of boxy if you hear them compared to some other things. But recommending speakers to people is like recommending a romantic partner or ice cream or something. It's very, very subjective. In general, I've never heard a client play a Pro Reverb through a WGS G12C or ET65 and be unhappy. Or similar things, Celestion Creamback 65s are also an awesome choice for that. There's some Jupiter and Fat Jimmy stuff that's made by WGS that's to similar spec. Some of the Alessandro Eminences are really good choices. There are an awful lot of good speakers out there. I can't tell you what you're going to like, but I can tell you what other clients have enjoyed. And I have to say that if I had a 67 Pro Reverb and I needed new speakers, I'd probably go with the WGS G12C, which is their version of the Jensen C12N, which is what Fender was using in the Twin at the time. That was kind of the top-of-the-line speaker Fender offered at the time. Let's see. Digital sucks, can't make it. Thanks, man. Have a good time with your gutters. Cheese pizza. Hey, wondering if I think it's a good idea for folks to try and keep tubes on hand as opposed to buying them as needed. Yeah, with things like the 7207 and 6550 and all less common stuff, there's a finite supply most likely. So get them if you can afford to get them. Have a stash. And what I recommend to anyone whose budget allows is if you have, say, a Pro Reverb and you need two 6L6s, buy a matched quad. That way when you have a tech bias one pair, 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, whatever it turns out to be, when you need to change those tubes, you can put the other pair in and it's matched and you don't have to rebias the amp. And if you have a Twin or 100-watt Marshall, if you can afford to, buy 8 tubes, have them all matched together. That way you don't have to rebias when you need to change tubes. If you've got an SVT and can afford to buy a dozen matched 6550s, great, but actually bring that amp to me. I need to rebias it for you because you obviously have money to pay me. But, if it's economically feasible, it can be a very good idea. Hello to everyone. Hey, Brett, appreciate that. I'm not going to do exclusively vintage amps. In general, I don't enjoy working on Rivera Fandangos, but as I've done some other amps for you, and you're in like Flynn, you're grandfathered in, yeah, contact me after this, and you can bring your Rivera in. There's nothing wrong with the Rivera. I find it kind of like changing a tire. There's no I don't think they're especially phenomenal amps. They're well built. They do what they do, and they, you know, it is someone else's idea of a really good amp. It's not mine. And so, okay, I'll fix it. But if someone brings me an old Fox, an old Marshall, or rarely a new thing like a Germino or a Metropolis or something, I get a certain enjoyment out of that I don't really get just from changing tires, so to speak. And I'm just being honest with you. But yeah, I've done some other work for you, Brett. You're in. I'll take care of your Rivera for you. No sustain on the G string at the 12th fret area. Well, you either have a high fret or a low fret there, or the truss rod is too loose. That's the most likely cause. It can sometimes be weird things like you've got a loose tuner, and that's just, because that's at the 12th fret, something just cancels out. In a really rare case, you might have just a dead spot in the wood, in which case you can detune the 4 steps and see if it stays with the pitch or that amount of tension, if it stays at the 12th fret. But typically that's going to be an issue with a high or low fret. Thank you, Calvin McClure. Hey, Andy Kulikowski. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm going to be trying to do. I've done an awful lot of long-form videos this week. I'm going to try to do some short ones because I'm trying to balance out. I get many more views on the shorter videos, but the people who watch the long videos tend to watch a lot more of them and really enjoy them. And I don't want to be short attention span theater, but neither do I want to drive off people who might benefit from seeing some of the content because they don't want to wait 40 minutes to get to the point that appeals to them. So, if I've just done a very thorough work through of the twin reverb and a very thorough run through of the super reverb. So when I do that basement that came in with it, I'm going to kind of do a short video on that. Say, hey, here's one thing you need to keep in mind when changing caps when they're original. Here's one thing to keep in mind that applies only to basement, because the rest of the amp, the work repeats, and it's a balancing act. Plus, if I just do a 1 hour or an hour and 20-minute video, I've got to record it and do the work, but then I've got to hear the whole thing while I'm getting the edit together. There's still an edit and taking out some extraneous ums and ahs, or times when, pardon me, that would be a great example. Times when the overhead mic makes my breath sound like Darth Vader. It's one of those things where normally the mic is about this, the overhead mic is this far from me, it's actually up, down, aimed right here. And sometimes everything's fine, but sometimes I'll turn my head in just the way that it really accentuates my breathing and makes me sound asthmatic, even though I'm not. So I've got to go back there and find all those and duck them down a level, because otherwise it sounds horrible. So it takes a long time to get those ready for prime time, and they take a long time to render, and they take a long time to upload. And I'm afraid they're going to drive away some viewers. So it's a balancing act. Hey, Calvin, you should get rid of your Blues Deluxe reissue. Lots of people out there want to buy them. Do not put the Fromel upgrade, because it's not an upgrade. It's not a fix. The Fromel kit is promising a lot more than it delivers, and usually all it does is damage the PCB. Then you have an amp that you can't sell, at least not in good conscience. There's so many better amps out there than the Hot Rod and Blues Deluxe series. Hey, Maki B, 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue, but you're looking for a smaller amp. Don't get a 68. The VibroChamp reissue is not a reissue. I don't know why they call it that, because the 68 VibroChamp they've got now has got reverb added to it. It is not at all a reissue. It's an okay sounding little amp, but is not that much quieter than a Deluxe Reverb. You can always, if you need a smaller amp than a Deluxe Reverb, you can have someone put a master volume in a Deluxe Reverb. You can get an attenuator. A 5-watt amp is what? Like 4 dB quieter than Deluxe Reverb? It's not a lot. especially if you're in a studio. But I mean, if you really want to get a small good amp for a studio, smaller Princeton's really an awfully nice thing. I love an old Vibro Champ, but the prices on those are much higher than reissues. You might be able to find a 70s Vibro Champ for a good price. I love the Swart stuff, the 5-watt and 7-watt Swart amps, but they are, again, an expensive option. I've not played any 68 reissue Fender that's worth having, and the Vibro Champ reissue is a nice little amp, but it's not really a reissue. It doesn't sound like a Vibro Champ. It sounds like a slightly smaller Princeton with kind of grainy digital reverb. Hey, Surge98 asking about his 88 Silver Jubilee. It was recapped in 2011. Hasn't been powered on regularly since then. Would I recap again at 13 years if the amp has only been used sporadically? This may surprise people, but the worst thing you can do for the filter caps in your amp is to let it sit. If you use that amp once or twice a week, almost every week, since then, those caps will be in better shape than letting them sit, because then when they sit, they dry out. And the electrical light dries out, and they're not good capacitors. So if you're planning on playing it a lot, I would expect to probably need to recap it. Don't power it on unless you have at least a current limiter. It depends on how long it's sat. If you used it three weeks ago and it worked okay, you can take the chance, but it is a risk when amps sit a long time. And, you may power it on and it behaves perfectly, in which case you have dodged a bullet, in which case you don't necessarily need to recap it. But, you may want to pull the chassis and take a look at the bottoms of the filter caps, because if they've got big bulges, let me show you what I'm talking about. From the outside, get to focus. From the outside, you won't see anything. But if you look inside the chassis, this is a new cap. You won't see any problem with it. But if you were to look at it and see round domes areas, like right here, maybe, just like looking like a giant pimple, that's one sign of a cap that's wanting to go. Or you could have a bunch of brown spooge coming out, visible where the metal bits are attached to the rest of the cap. So if you see that, expect to recap. If you don't see any of that and it sounds okay, it probably is okay for a while. Hey, Michael Evans. Yeah, the concert I'm working on right now, I still have it. I got to finish the speaker cable. Does not have a photocell because it is the harmonic tremolo. And I will probably do a video on trem types pretty soon, because this gets asked a lot. There's bias wiggle, which can be just bias of an individual tube, like an old Vibrolux. Is that right? Or Tremolux, sorry. It can be output bias wiggle, like you'd find either a fixed bias, like a Princeton Reverb, or cathode bias, like you'd find in some current Voxes and the Gibson GA18Ts. You can have opto trim, like you find in the AB763 amps and others, reverb and non-reverb. Everything larger than the Princeton, except the basement, pretty much. And you can also have the harmonic trim, which is used in the early concerts and the brownface era amps. Some of those, the concerts and pros and such, had a harmonic trim. A very similar circuit is used in the classic JMI AC30, and a similar circuit, though done with inductors rather than just caps and resistors, is done in the Magnatone amps. But to really explain it now, I don't have any graphs or drawings prepared, and I would need that to show you how this stuff works. And it wouldn't be fair to everyone else, because that would be a 30-minute talk at least. But I will do a video on tremolo types, because I think it's something that people don't understand and people would be interested in. So I will get to that. Why is my phone still beeping? Just one second. In just a second, it's my son. I need to check this. All right. Why am I getting these texts? I guess it's because it's still connected to my Wi-Fi, even though I turned off the 5G. I thought it would only come through with 5G. I'll find out. All right, let's see. Doopy-doopy-doo. Dennis Flock is waiting to get his 79 Les Paul custom back from being refretted. That's great. Hey, Marcus Neiman. In that twin, I used some Vishay 562Rs in the Tremolo circuit because they cosmetically match in many ways. The old Class 2 ceramics, though the ones that Fender used were Z5s, the ones with the worst temperature rating. And the 562Rs I use have a better temperature rating. I think they're the Y class. But if I were building, if that were a 70s amp, or a reissue, or building that circuit, I wouldn't use those. I'd use some little 1,000 or 2,000 kilovolt Murata multi-layered discs. They're smaller, and they will never change in value in that circuit. They just won't be affected by humidity, et cetera, et cetera. But part of the thing with the old amps is the whole thing. It's really just to make the owner feel good about having this amp. This amp is as close to possible to being original while still sounding original. I don't want to have all original parts if the amp doesn't work. But if I can put parts that are both cosmetically and performance-wise equivalent to the original parts and have the amp work properly, that's better than saying, all right, we're going to go all new production, everything, and it will not look at all right, and it'll sound even better. Some wheels don't need to be reinvented. But 562R series from Vishay and 1 kilovolts are fantastic. Hey, Andy, I've got a lot of videos up on Blackface Basement. Some just strict restorations, some restorations where the output section gets changed to AA864 with the AB165 preamp. But I do have a couple of them where I have made changes for the bass channel to make them more guitar friendly or more guitar specific. That's only in cases where the amp coming in was already butchered. If it comes in, it's got all the original stuff, it goes back with the original stuff. But I don't think that you need to jumper channels on a Blackface Basement if you're talking AA864 to AB165, because each channel's got so much damn gain already, you don't need that. But see my other videos on that. I've got a lot of that. Martin, I would love to tell you about the importance of transformers and how they affect tone, but that would be a 3-hour chat. And again, I don't have all the diagrams. I will sum up by saying that a good power transformer does not impact tone. By good, I mean that it does not emit a radiant field. It doesn't have a noise field, which is injected into other things, and that it is rated comfortably for the current being drawn from it. If you want sag, you don't want to introduce sag through the power transformer because that will turn into heat. You can have other things in the circuit sag or barely be able to provide current, but you don't want to have the power transformer sweat. You don't want it to run too hot. A choke, that's real. Beyond a certain point, it gets subjective, like 3.7 Henrys and a lot of Marshalls, and about the same for a lot of Fenders. And then you'll get 10 Henry chokes and 11 Henry chokes and 20 Henry chokes, which are way beyond what's necessary from a design perspective, but they affect the sound, and that gets subjective. Output transformers are the bulk of the thing, and that gets really deep. There are things that you can do that are wrong from a scientific point of view that sound cool to us, like the 28-watt output transformer in a Vibrolux, where the power section is would be capable of doing about 40 watts if it had a different output transformer. But that output transformer clamps everything down, and the output transformer adds some saturation and distortion, and it when it behaves that way non-linearly, it does a reflected impedance thing back to the power tubes, and that's one of the reasons a Vibrolux, when you push it, sounds different from other similar era Fenders. But you have to know when you can do that and when you want to have the output transformer be big and bold. If you were to do that same Vibrolux trick with, say, a high watt, you'd probably end up with a bunch of scorched tubes and short life. So I will probably talk about transformers a lot through the course of videos, but I don't know if I can do any more here right now, so it's fair to everyone else. Sorry. And I appreciate your offer to show me around Edinburgh. I would love that. Hey, thanks, John. Well, you kind of saw what's under the main board in that video just a day or two ago, where I pulled the insulation board. But what's underneath them? You mean you want to see the back of the main board as far as the wires go? I know that there are some videos on this channel where you can see that, and I always point you most recently probably to the Rusty Baseman series, because I had to take everything out of that amp and repopulate everything and put it back together. Hey, Gringo Pig. So we've got at least two people here from the UK. Where do I get my screwdrivers? There's a great bar down the street. I think I got the ones I have now at Home Depot or Lowe's. But I've lost some from the set, mismatched, so I'm probably going to order a new set. I've just got to, see if I need to go better than DeWalt, or whether DeWalt is good. I like DeWalt because I can usually see them because they're yellow. The handles, that is. They're not scared of anything. It's just a color coincidence. Hey, Nick, Sarah, is it bad that my Vibrolux is getting pretty hot? I can feel the heat on the front panel. When should one start to be concerned? Some heat is normal, and the amp is designed for that. If you cannot keep your fingers on the power transformer for more than 5 seconds, you might have a big problem. That would be an indication that there's too much heat. Now, there are two sources of heat. There's radiant heat. The rectifier tube in a Vibrolux gets hot. The output tubes get very, very hot. I mean, they get really hot. People don't realize how hot those tubes get, especially after they've been on for like 20 minutes. They will burn the hell out of you. And they radiate heat. And that steel chassis absorbs that heat and heats up, and very slowly. And the iron of the power transformer will absorb that radiant heat, and eventually it'll get to a stable operating temperature that can be quite warm. And eventually that radiant heat reaches even to the front panel. Typically, by the time it gets to the faceplate, it's warm but not hot. But the other source of heat is when the transformer has too much current and is generating heat inside it. Or not generating too much current. Too much current is being drawn from it, and that's when it can get painful to the touch. So if you keep your amp on for 30 minutes and then reach underneath and make sure you don't touch those tubes, touch the power transformer, and it's too hot to leave your fingers on for more than 5 seconds, take your amp to a tech. What would be the best gigging amp for country, says Texas Outdoors Podcast. It's really going to depend on the PAs that you use, the stages that you play, whether you're playing in a small band where you're responsible for your own sound, or whether you're in a medium-sized band where you have maybe your own PA and can set things up, or whether you're on a big stage where you have a monitor dude. In general, most guys are going to be happy with a deluxe reverb, a Vibrolux reverb, a super reverb at the very high end of things, or an AC30. Some guys even be fine with an AC15. In fact, a lot of guys be happy with an AC15. Pretty much anyone who can gig with a deluxe reverb is going to be happy with an AC15. Anyone who can gig with a Vibrolux reverb or a super is going to be happy with an AC30. And if you were to go to Austin or Nashville bars, I guarantee you that 9 times out of 10, you're just going to see a deluxe reverb set up on an old chair or a milk crate, and it's going to sound great. Deluxe reverb is really good for that. You have a Marsa, hey Chris, pitch a guitar. You have a Mesa Mark IV that went down. Found 2 bad screen resistors and bad power tubes. Hey, I'm glad my videos helped. Yeah, if that's all that's wrong, you got very, very lucky. While you have the app open, especially with a bad power tube, find the schematic and find the output coupling caps on the phase inverter, because those are 400 volt caps in that amp, and those things very, very commonly leak. A lot of the 400 volt orange drops in that amp will leak. But if it's leaking positive voltage into the negative voltage on the grids of the output tubes, it'll kill output tubes. So if you can change some screen resistors and you think you can change do a recap, if necessary, it may not be necessary to recap it. Change out those 2 400 volt orange drops for some 630 volt caps. You can use orange drops if you want. You can use 716p, 714, 716p, 715p, 400 PS, etc. Or you can just get some much easier for you to populate on the board would be to get some what are they called? Panasonic ECQs. They're physically smaller. They fit in the space better, because a lot of times the larger orange drops in a Mesa are too crammed close together. They don't quite fit. And then you won't have it be as likely to kill output tubes, but everything that you like about the sound will still be there. You won't hear any difference between the Mesa branded orange drops and the Panasonic ECQs. You can get the Panasonics at DigiKey and Mauser. Hey, Matt Johnson, you keep giving me great big super chats. You don't need to. I have to go. I'm gonna have to come down to New Orleans and take you to dinner sometime. Oh, you had your kidney surgery yesterday. Oh man. Ooh, better out than in. That's for damn sure. Any recommendations on a modern version of a vintage big box deluxe memory man? I don't know, because I don't keep up very much with the market. I know that Sir has a delay that came out about a year or 2 ago, which I don't remember the name of it. And John's son did it, and John's son is a brilliant electrical engineer. I would look at that. I don't know what your price point is. There is something unique about the sound of an old deluxe memory man, but dealing with the plug-in power supply, et cetera, is not fun. But I am not your pedal guru, because I don't like most pedals, and I don't keep up with what everything hits the market. But anything that says Sir on it is definitely worth plugging into to see if it works for you. A lot of digital pedals today are very, very noisy, which drives me nuts. I'd rather have an old music deluxe memory man with a little bit of hiss when it's turned on. I would true bypass it, but just a little bit of hiss when it's on, as opposed to the whine and you get with 99% of modern high-end digital pedals today. It drives me nuts. Hey Seth B, I've had some good luck with the TAD Red Bass GZ34s, but it certainly costs more than the JJ and the Sovtech. So you're gonna be happy with the G12Cs over the Utahs. But people do love the Utahs. I find them kind of. I'm a hypocrite. I love the Beatles, but I find Utahs too boxy and slotted in person. But a lot of that stuff starting, when they got the Showman on Revolver and all the way through, a lot of that was Utahs and the Showman cabs. And is not a full range, full response speaker. In that context, it worked. In person, I find it very narrow bandwidth. And I love creambacks. I've tried this Neo creamback in a deluxe reverb, Dennis Flock, and I thought it was a really nice sounding speaker. I thought it was a little bit bright compared to the ceramic versions, but not to the point where I couldn't adjust the amp to accommodate that. Hey, Bladder Splattle. I talked about those ceramic discs at the top of the chat. Vishay 562R, 1 kilovolts. Yeah. Hey, Colin, I appreciate that very much. Yeah, the AC15C1 reverb is really nice, but the CC reverb is as you say, pants. A new tank helps a little bit, but the circuit is really not great. And I hate to say this, I'm not a fan of the AC15CC, the Custom Classic. It has so many other problems. The AC30CC was a pretty good amp, though I think the AC30C is better. But the AC15CC, you can't really fix the reverb without spending as much money on it as you would just to sell it and then get the better sounding AC15C. You can, however, find, I think it might be R23, R26. There's a resistor in that circuit right where the cut circuit would be in a real Vox. Between the grids of the output tubes, they've got a 220K resistor in series with a 4.7 nanofarad cap. I've shown this in I think the most recent video or two on that model. Well, you can find it. Anyway, on a real Vox, that 220 is actually a 220 or 250K pot where you can adjust it and adjust that value. And most people would turn that pot so it's more like 68K to 100K. But they went the full 220K on the AC15C and on the previous AC15 TBX. And that's just the nails on the blackboard brightest setting on a real Vox. So you can take, say, if you find that resistor, jumper like a 100K or 68K resistor across the 220K, and all of a sudden the whole thing breathes and is warm and wonderful without that. Hey, Flaming Eternity, appreciate that. What is one feature I wish was more common on amps, playing in tone-wise or as a tech? As a tech, I would like an amp to have no more than X number of screws per speaker, by which I mean a 1x12 amplifier can only have so many screws, and a 2x12 can only have this many more for the larger panel, because I'll get an amp in where there's one panel on the back, and it's like, even for like a combo 1x12, and it'll have like 16 different screws I got to take off to get that thing out, and a lot of it's not adding any rigidity, that, or they could have said, "Oh, we're going to do a bottom board with 4 to 6 screws and a top board." That way, we have to access one thing. You only have to take off one of the boards. As a tech, I find that the more expensive amps have a sane amount of screws involved. The cheaper the amp gets, the more the screws there are. So the cheaper the amp is, the more of a pain it is to open. The longer it takes me to open, the longer it takes me to close it up. So there's more labor costs for the cheaper amp that's not worth putting too much labor into. As a tech and as a player, I think we should start small. We should start by saying amplifiers which have more than 400 volts present DC should not have 400 volt caps in place. And that can be a Mesa with 400 volt coupling caps with more than 400 volts across them. That can be a Morgan with 450 volt caps with 480 volts across them, and then they fail. That could be, all kinds of things. I would like it if things that were labeled as made as USA and marketed as made in USA and go America Screaming Eagles bullshit were actually made in the USA. And there's nothing wrong with an imported amp, but be honest about it, people. As a player, things I wish were more common on amps. Really good master volumes, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Just a simple implementation that's good would be very nice. Hey, Rob, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was not complaining earlier, but yes, those long videos do take a long time to get ready for everyone. And then I watch it back and I find where I misspeak. Usually it's something obvious where I'd say, like pot instead of knob. But I'm like, man, I should have caught that. I need more people, but it's just me doing everything. So thank you very much, Rob. And thank you, Alex. Clivey, hey, 5F8A, that's the low power tweed twin or high power tweed twin. For pedal steel, solid state rectifier beneficial for increased clean headroom, your opinion? Not really. That amp's got a lot of kind of compression built into it. You're not going to get a big increase in headroom out of that due to various things. And I'm trying to remember, I think that amp may be, it's fixed bias, but it's not adjustable fixed bias. So changing the rectifier can throw the bias off significantly. I would really say if you want more clean headroom, find a more efficient speaker would be the best way to go, or get a different twin. The 5F8A is not designed for, it was designed to have clean headroom, but it had clean headroom from 1957, 1958. By modern standards, it breaks up pretty early. So, Soapbox Earth says, people who like short videos can skip around the long ones. Yeah, but if I have too many long ones, then too many people skip. And then I don't make much money off them. And I don't make a ton of money off the videos, but I make enough that it's worth doing it. Though I am going to be starting up a Patreon when I find the time to get around to it. Because I do appreciate that people want to support me more. But, I do have to keep an eye out for making the channel at least pay for itself. So, it's one of those things. So if I can have a balance that appeals to enough people consistently that I don't have the numbers fluctuating, because I see all the numbers and I know what people say they want, and then I know what people end up watching, and they're not always the same thing. Hey, Greg G. I have not worked on a Red Bear combo. I have worked on some Sovtechs from that era. And yeah, they do have those strange Soviet, ex-Soviet military caps. I don't have a hint. The one that came in, I changed them all out for modern Western style caps. And on one, I said, I'm sorry, this is not worth me doing all that on. As time has passed, because it was in really bad shape. Sorry. Seth B, I'm reading your comments about the 1 amp, the amperage draw of your amps. I don't know how many people can relate to it, so I'm not bringing it up here. But I respect you and I appreciate you. I am reading you. No problem, Calvin. Glad to help. What amp then would I recommend, Calvin? I don't remember what your previous question was. I'm sorry. Hey, Frederico. He says, I have no experience with Blankenship amps. What's your professional opinion? Roy rocks. Roy Blankenship's a mensch. He's a great guy. Builds really good sounding amps. If you play a Blankenship amp and that's the sound that makes you smile, there's nothing behind the curtain that'll take that smile away. They're good things. Thanks, Maki B. I don't know about best channel ever. I think it's probably the best channel originating from this room. Oh, that's all I can aim for. Hey, Maurice Spender, thank you. Replacement filter cap board for a 70s SVT. I do have some, and send me an email. And if you already have, I'm sorry, I'll look for it. I do have a board made up, and at the time I made up a PDF of things that anyone using it needs to know. It's for the black line and blue line SVTs, not for later stuff, but if you have 70s, it probably fall in there. So, yeah, contact me after this. And I got to look and see what the cost is. It's like $35, $40, something like that. No big deal. It would give you, and it comes with a part list of Mauser part numbers, so it doesn't come with all the parts. If you live outside the U.S., I could, of course, order those parts, have them shipped to me, and include them all with the board and ship it to you, so you only have one international shipping. But if you're in the U.S., it'd probably be cheaper for you to order the parts yourself from Mauser. It has all the part numbers in it. What are my personal top 3 amp brands, craftsmanship-wise? In theory, one of them would have to be just one second, trying to remember his name. Mark Bartel. Used to do Tone King before he sold off Tone King. He makes his own amps under Bartel. And I have only seen photos. My God, he does gorgeous work. It's so pretty, it almost has to sound fantastic. That's an insane level of quality. Top 2, Fenders before 1973. Any Fender from about 55 when they started using the cathodione phase inverter to 1973 when they started to wax the boards and they changed the baffle. Any of those amps is just not perfect, but practically as good as. And if you take care of it, it can, I've got 6 here that are 50 to 65 years old, and they're all working fine now after generational maintenance. Some of them have lasted a long time with no maintenance, and now it's time for them. And you just can't do better than that. They're iconic. 3, in terms of craftsmanship, I'll give a shout out to Greg Germino. He builds a really good amp, and he builds them intelligently, and he spends money where it's necessary, and he doesn't spend money where it's just for show. And the assembly is world class. The solder work is great. There's nothing to second guess in them, and he has a lot of different models. So if you don't like his JTM 45, try his Monterey. If you don't like the Monterey, try his Super Lead. I don't remember what model numbers he gives them. They're all derived from Marshalls, obviously. But I'll give the nod to Greg Germino. He makes a damn fine amp. I would go so far as to say that in terms of build quality, he builds a much better amp than Marshall ever did, consistently at least. Marshall was like Vox. They would always say, this is what we're going to build. Oh, that supplier's out this week? All right, let's go down to the local radio spares store and see what they got. So, yeah. Greg Germino, if you ever watch this, think highly of you. Let's see. Hey, PF. Yeah, if you really want to age the jack, the trick is you want to expose just the stuff that's going to be visible to the vinegar. You don't really want to tarnish the interconnections because the vinegar fumes age things a slightly different way than actual age. You can see how I actually didn't show it. I just talked about it. Basically, what I would do with small parts is I would put them in a Tupperware container about this big, and I would take a smaller cup or bowl and put it in the Tupperware, and in that small bowl I would put a little bit of white vinegar. I put the part in the Tupperware container, and then I put the lid on, and I'd check back every maybe 5 to 6 hours and see where it was at, maybe turn it so a different part was exposed to air if necessary. And overnight, that's how I aged the bridge on my 335. But with a jack, especially with something with switching contacts, you would only want to age the outside. So you would probably want to do something, maybe a cotton ball down the middle coming from the back, and then taping off the rest of it so that only the front of the bushing is exposed to that stuff. I suppose you could try just taking the jack with the bushing down and dipping in some white vinegar, taking it up and looking at it, and then wiping it off and seeing how much change happens. That will happen much faster than the fumes, but you'd have it very controlled. It'd only be on that one surface. And as these jacks are inexpensive, it'll cost you $2-3 to see if that works. If that doesn't work, then you get another one. That would be the way to do it. but anything that's nickel like that will react that way. Hey, Andor, I'm trying to get the calibers made. I'm trying to get some supply issues sorted out, and I just haven't had the time. Hey, Mr. Al, depends on what's in stock. It used to be, I'd say, Habor or Classic Tone. Classic Tone's gone. Habor would be my first port of call, and if they're in stock, that'd be a great choice. If they're not in stock, I would probably go Mercury, but my price on a Mercury is not your price on a Mercury. So if a client's amp came in and had an odd transformer that Habor wasn't making, I'd get them a Mercury. It costs about $20 more than the Habor. But if a client or you were to buy directly from Mercury, it costs 40 to 50% more, or more than that sometimes. I mean, my price on one of those is a lot less than the list, and I pass it on to customers. Certain things in client budgets, I would go with Hammond, though I've not been as happy with Hammond lately as I used to be. And I don't understand what you mean by why would someone replace a tube rectifier with a cap in a deluxe reverb. I think you mean a solid-state plug-in kind of thing. People think that it's going to magically turn it into a twin reverb. There are actually things you can do to a deluxe reverb to increase headroom. That's not really it. That'll give you a minor increase in headroom. Look at, hint, the 10-volt drop of a GZ34 versus diodes. Now look at the deluxe reverb circuit versus the super reverb circuit. Super reverb's got a 1K and then a 4.7K dropper. Deluxe reverb's got two 10K droppers. Just hint, hint, hint. Let's see. 68 microfarad, Seth. That's an odd value to choose. Why would you mess with I wouldn't mess with a 4 microfarad. I'd just get a 4.7 microfarad. Given the tolerance spec of those old electrolytics, no one would notice any difference. But yeah, Chemits are fantastic. They're just so damn expensive. First areas to check for hiss in a 5E3, Michael Jennings says. First of all, rule out a bad tube. 90% of the problems in a tube amp is a tube. Second of all, did it ever work? Did it used to not have hiss? Because there are builds out there that would never have been quiet, and you can pull your hair out trying to make them quiet if you're not sitting in a position of a guy like me. But if it used to be quiet and now it isn't, most of the time it's going to be either a tube, moisture / voltage in the board, and you can often hear that as you turn the volume pot on the amp or the volume pot on your guitar. If you hear it, that means that's a good sign of DC. And it can also be if the amp has got old carbon composite resistors or even carbon resistors, carbon films, very rarely can get noisy. But I would start with tubes. Hey, Lion Circle. He asks, is an amp chassis cradle absolutely necessary or is it a luxury accessory? Thanks for doing what I do. It is totally luxury. If I were to be building a whole lot of one amp, I would build a cradle that would hold that chassis at a specific angle, and then I would just put different things on it. But when you're doing what I do, and every chassis is a different size and weight and shape, and some of the transformers would block using a traditional cradle, I could buy one of those big adjustable wooden cradles that would look great on the channel, but it would take 5 to 10 minutes to set it up. I tend to use these sturdy white cardboard boxes a lot of the time. I'll use books as necessary to stack things. Like if I get one where the power transformer sits flush on the desk, but the other end is too low, I'll put a book under the output transformer, raise it up. I can work much faster with that, and I'm going to do something really fancy soon. I'm going to go over to the hardware store and buy some sections of 4x4 and sand them and stain them or paint them so they'll look really cool, and they'll be essentially a hardcore version of those white boxes. I'll probably go another inch in one dimension just to be able to get higher off the bench when necessary. That'll do 90% of amps, just 2 sturdy blocks. I would probably make them like 8 inches by 4 inches by 6 inches, and make sure they don't have any splinters. And if something were to happen to one, get another one. Probably cost $10. I think Stu Mac now officially hates me. Hey, Soapbox Earth. If I had a train wreck amp in, I would address train wreck. But I try not to address amps that I don't have in front of me on the channel, because it feels like I'm trying to make up content, and I don't have any example to give at that point. I can't say, see, and this is why. Ken did a lot of weird things, some of which very much intentionally sounded great. Some of it kind of, I think, were happy accidents that he embraced. You know, Ken was a really important guy in the community, but, you know, part of genius is to recognize when, oh, my mistake sounds better than what I intended, and then you own it. Speaking of owning mistakes, allô, Alain, ça va? Alan is so cool. Fluid Audio Group, my buddy Alan Benoit. He's got the schematic for an SLO tattooed on his arm. That's hardcore. I don't know if I have experience with a Laney Super Cub, Jordan Jones. I've only had like 4 Laneys in that weren't vintage, and I don't remember what they were. I think the last one was a Lion. It was like blue and cream and kind of a voxy thing. I'm never really that impressed with them, but I'm not unimpressed. They're just kind of vanilla that's the impact they had on me. They're kind of vanilla, not that different from a crate. That's not meant as an insult, but no lasting impression other than, oh, it was a little bit noisy. I fixed it and went away. Hey, Jay Jules. I don't recall. I have known that in the past, but I don't remember now. But call Sir. They'll tell you. They will tell you everything that they use. There's nothing proprietary in the amps. It's just using things very well. That's right, Chris. It's the Sir Discovery delay. That's a really, really good sounding delay pedal. Hey, Kyle Driscoll. Well, you don't changing the screen grid doesn't affect anything else in the amp as far as calibrating. I always cool off the bias to like 55 to 60% as opposed to 120% Fender. But yeah, chilling the bias down to a sane level like you'd find in any other fixed bias amp in the world, and then giving those EL84s some actual screen grids as opposed to 100 ohms, and then moving that one ribbon cable away from the blue primary wire so you don't get oscillation and buzz, and the amp lasts a lot better, well, at least till the solder-starved, lead-free, bad solder joint PCB EL84 connections burn up, then you're SOL. If you have a Blues Junior that's working, I advise that you sell it. If you're considering buying a Blues Junior, don't. If you're considering arguing with me, go watch all the videos on them. They're horrible things. Yeah, they sound good when they're working. That's like saying, my car drives great when it drives. A lot of them are going to end up on blocks in the driveway. I don't. One Firebird asked if I know of any techs in southwestern Ontario. I am a typically ignorant American. My map of Canada is very spotty. I have a good friend named Chris Church, who's a great tech outside of Toronto in Hamilton, Ontario. I don't know where Hamilton, Ontario is in relation to southwestern, northern, central, et cetera, et cetera. I apologize. And I know some good techs out towards the Vancouver area. And then in the middle, it's just like the American West with more cold. So I'm sorry, my map of Canada is very focused on the cities. And being a history guy, it's mostly focused around Montreal. Thank you, OTOSS, OTOS. Appreciate that very much. Yeah, Utahs are now piles. Yeah, I'm not. Oxford, Utah, nothing to write home about. You and I see eye to eye on that, Seth. And they were just very inexpensive things that Leo probably got good deals on. Leo was a miser. Despite all that, he made some really good sounding stuff. But the C12N kills any of the Oxfords and Utahs. All right, we're right up at 1 hour. We're going to take a 7-minute intermission, and we will get to the rest of them. Hey, Hal Hawkins is here. Hal, you texted me earlier. Hopefully you're hearing me say this now. Yeah, bring your deluxe in this afternoon. I'll see everyone in 7 minutes. All right, we'll end this intermission a little bit early so I can get some questions and all that fun stuff. Box of goodies arrived to finish that. Make sure I don't give my address out. The box of goodies arrived to finish out. I can't orient myself to finish out the high watt. Oh, it's got my address right there. Damn it. CE, you got me. All right, none of y'all send anything weird. Anyway, high watt stuff. And Hal Hawkins, I got in touch with him during the break. He may be dropping his old deluxe reverb off while the stream's happening, so he may make an appearance. I have a question for you guys. I know you can hear this guitar. How well can you hear it? Does it sound like you get a sense of what it really sounds like, or is this a guitar? Botched it. All right, so if you get a little distortion on the low end, is it coming from the thing? I'm hitting the mic. Yeah, all right, I'm hitting the mic a little too hard. Sorry. Anyway, it does sound like an SG. Yeah, I love this guitar. I haven't played that Zeppelin thing in a long time, and I haven't played it sitting up like this, obviously, but I love the sound of this for that kind of stuff. Anyway, the reason I wanted to do this, and some of you know this, so humor us. A lot of people need to know this kind of stuff because people ask me all the time, you know, it's so bright, or it's not bright enough, or my neck pickup is woofy. So I'm going to this 65 Super Reverb. So, you know, stacked in our favor already. There is no bright switch on this channel yet. I'm changing that out. If it were in there, it'd still be off. I have the treble just below 6. I've got the bass just about 5. I've got the mids just about 5, which makes it very smooth and even sound. But I set that using the neck pickup. I can't play up here now. Anyway, I can play down here where you can't see. So I set the amp using the neck pickup. If I go to the bridge pickup, it's really bright. I can do two things. This is a little ice pick by Diodario. It's a very thin, hard pick. I can change to a Jazz 3. I can also turn the tone down on the treble. So if I go down to like 5.5 on the bridge pickup, so very nice bridge sound. Here's the neck. Nice full low end, nice high end definition on the neck pickup. I can always roll it back on the neck if I want. When I go to the bridge, it doesn't take your head off. So that's one of the tricks, is set one of these for the neck pickup with your amp and then adjust the bridge tone. I know a lot of guys never touch the volume and tone on their guitars. I can't tell you to do it, but I think everyone should play around with it at the very least. And, you know, try different picks. Try not using a pick. All these things matter. And sit down in a room with just a guitar and one amp and no pedals. Even at very moderate volumes, see how many different sounds you can get just with your hands, just with your fingers, just with different pieces of plastic if necessary, and your controls. Even on a Strat, even on a Tele, you can really change things radically. How does it react? How does it sound when you turn the volume down to like 8? You can get a very different sounding instrument, and you learn when you can get away with that volume drop in order, especially if you have an amp like this, that if I turn the amp up a little bit and turn the volume on the guitar down a little bit, it's a whole different feel than having the guitar full up and the amp turned down a little bit. Play around with all that stuff if you're new to this concept. Let's see. Like I said, a lot of you already know this, but I have people from all walks of life, parts of the world, and different playing experience here. So glad to. I wish I hadn't had to subscribe to Guitar for the Practicing Musician for 10 years, and then only discover that on my own because it was never in any of the damn articles. Let's see. Yeah, hey Captain Fineweather. Yeah, I did recommend adding about a 470 500 picofarad cap across 100K plate on the AC15 CC one, not the C1, the CC one. The AC15 C1 has got a cathode follower, a tone stack. The CC has the plate driven, and I don't remember if it's what the resistor number. Sorry, on the CC. The CC with its plate-driven tone stack, if you put that cap across that, it makes the whole thing a little less bright, a little less hard. It feels a little more like the cathode follower. If you do that in conjunction with changing the tone circuit I talked about earlier in the stream, that can improve the AC15 CC. Is still not a favorite amp of mine. Thanks. Speaking of Mr. Howell, thank you, sir. Jeffrey Parker, that's much appreciated on my end, too. Thank you, sir. Let me take that nagging thing off. Sorry. I'm trying to... The likes do help, and I get about a 10% view to like ratio on most videos. And I know that's most because most people don't think about it, or people are watching on their TV, and it's hard to do on TVs and other devices. But if you have it on your phone or your computer or your tablet, if you were to remember to hit that like, it really does help the channel. And I don't like talking about this kind of stuff. I'm never going to smash that like button, or this segment of this video is brought to you by blah blah blah. Because I don't think anyone needs to get VPN advice from video game channels, etc. Let's see. Thomas Carlos, true isolated supplies are very necessary. It's not so much about noise bleeding, it's about ground loops. You don't have ground loops, so an isolated supply breaks the ground loops through the power. So whether that's Voodoo Labs pedal power or some of the other options on the market, make sure it really is isolated, and it's a good thing to have. Hey, Ted, two. Yeah, I don't know if you need to have the brown box, but some kind of attenuator can be nice. Most Fenders before, about 72 are really happiest with the 114 supply. Some early 50s stuff is happier with actual closer to 110. You can use a brown box if you want. If you just want to be able to, you can look into uninterruptible power supplies on Amazon. You can get one rated for about 5 to 10 amps. That'll give you a choice of a fixed 120 or fixed 110. That'd be sufficient for 1 or 2 smaller amplifiers at a time. You want to have a wall like Marty McFly all going into that one. But there are various options to get the power down, from a Variac to a brown box to a regulated, so to speak, uninterruptible power supply. Sounds okay, more treble than I'd use. Yeah, well, I was trying to make it kind of flat but capable of being bright. I could turn the treble down more on the amp. I mostly was just trying to show the balance between the neck and the bridge. Sorry, that was sent to me, said that. I saw that in the current stuff. I'll get to all the responses to that in a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, now, Seth B., TAD is now selected a Pisvane tube, as far as I know. Kimball, I don't know anything about ugly amps. Sorry. Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Fountain Bird. Thanks, Thomas O. Carlos. Appreciate you. Thank you very much. That's very nice of you. Let's see. Hey, Michael Fiolka. Very glad to see that. Based on my videos, he was able to service a Silverface Bassman 100. There was a white wire going from the doghouse into the chassis to nowhere. Removed it. You know why? It might have been a ground connection that someone changed. Some of those 70s Fenders, instead of having the screen, phase inverter, and preamp grounds all joined together, then going to the input jack with one wire, they would have multiple ground connections throughout the amp. Say that maybe the reservoir cap's always separated from the others in all the Fenders, but maybe there'd be one place for the screen cap to go, one place for the phase inverter cap to go, one place for the any other preamp caps to go. And sometimes they would do it even with white wire in that period. And it's possible that someone just jumpered them on the board and just steered them to one place. There was an extra wire. Without having your amp in front of me, I can't tell you. Either that or they... That's the most likely thing. But was it soldered at the doghouse? Well, I guess you may not remember at this point. I've seen some strange things in some later 70s Fenders, but I'm glad you were able to get it going. Hey, Elbow James. Yeah, sometimes, like I said in the video last night, those ground wires just pull out, and sometimes you can reattach them. Sometimes you need to take those wires out and replace them with longer ones with a little bit of strain relief built in. All those wires from the board to the chassis used to be the negative leads of the original cathode bypass caps in those amps. And it's just wire. If you need to replace it, use some 22 or 20 gauge wire, bus wire. Makes no difference. Hey, Anthony D'Angelo. Appreciate that. Power conditioners won't do much. Inexpensive power strip type conditioner did not help. No conditioner until you spend about $4,000 and up is going to do all that much. There's just not much you can do. When the AC is noisy, you'll have noise in your amp, and adding a couple of caps or various cheap little things that people do doesn't do that much. I'm sorry. It's really hard to undo noise on the AC line once it's created. The only way to really do it is to have an isolation one-to-one transformer, and that's expensive. You can straighten the boards out a lot, Elbow James. It's a pain in the butt. If you look at the video I put up yesterday or the day before, where I removed the backing board and soaked one area of that board with isopropyl and did some stuff there. If you take both boards out and you absolutely soak each board in isopropyl, and then you put the lower board back in while it's still wet, and you find a gentle way to clamp everything flush down as much as possible, when all the alcohol dries, a lot of those curves will be evened out. It'll remember the new shape, which can buy you a decade or two before it starts to move again. Or you can, probably the more realistic thing is to say, hey, it's probably moved about as much as it ever will, so I'll just make sure it's clean and free of DC, and any horizontally mounted resistors I'll reflow or replace, and at that point, it's probably not going to move much more. Yeah, Matt, check out the Sir Discovery. I think you'll enjoy that. I don't know Mike's stuff at P2P. Mike, sorry, DVJ. Do I have a truss belt brand suggestion to carry around a Bassman? Well, no, aside from like a month ago when I threw my back out while tying my shoes. In general, I can pick up any amplifier. I can pick up 2 SVT heads at once if I need to. I just can't tie my shoes without thinking about it. It's an odd thing about being 53. Not to be like Mr. Macho guy on the internet, but I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'2". I'm 240 on a good day. So I've not met too many amps I have problems with. It's just the mundane stuff that gets me. I would probably need the belt seriously to, put the dishes away more than I need the belt to pick up an amp. Because with an amp, I'm aware of where I'm at and where my arms are, my back arm, how my legs are working. It's when you don't think about things that you kill yourself. At a certain age, I'm not quite as old as my hair would indicate. My hair started to go gray at 30, which is, I thought it was a really bad thing, but it turned out that a lot of significant, wonderful women in my life liked it. So, and they don't sell this in a jar. Can't get this in a can. My thoughts on the Deluxe Reverb reissue. I like the 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue very much, not the 68. The 65 is quite good. Much better amp to have than the Blues Deluxe reissue. In its price range, pretty much the 2 amps I recommend to people the most are the 65 reissue Deluxe Reverb with a few changes, which do not have to be done immediately. I have a lot of videos on those changes. Some are reliability changes, and a lot of the Deluxe Reverbs come with some eminent special design speakers or Jensen C12Ks that I happen to think are not very good sounding speakers. But changing a speaker in an amp is not that expensive a proposition, typically $75 to $150, and a better speaker can transform that. The other amp I really like and recommend to people who don't need a weight belt to pick it up is the Vox AC15 Custom, the AC15C1. That is also a very good amp for the same price range, or less. Sometimes you can get one much less. I have not played around with a 6Z4 rectifier and a 5F2A. Sorry, no. Every 5F2A that's come in had the 5Y3, and the only thing I played around with that is sometimes it would come in with a Sovtech that wasn't really a 5Y3, and I'd have to change that out. Sorry. Oh, I see what you're doing with the 68 microfarads. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. Anyone who can tell the difference between a 70 microfarad, a 68 microfarad, and a 100 microfarad is too busy working in a mastering studio to mess with it, to even be around these noisy guitar amps. Yeah, I wish Kemet axials were still more readily available. They're so expensive when you can even get them. But yeah, those silver Kemets are things of beauty. I've not ever heard of a Fender Vaporize WC Keck. I'm not sure how you pronounce your name. I'm sorry. I've never heard of Vaporizer. Sounds pretty simple. Hope it works. Hey, S. Pumpstein, thanks very much. Can I describe the virtual ground solution I applied with the SVT I repaired recently? I'm not remembering doing a virtual ground solution with an SVT. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry. The SVT is weird. There's the chassis of the power section. There's the chassis of the preamp. The power section chassis must be tied to earth ground. There are 2 different ground connections, negative signal connections between the 2 chassis. And that creates a ground loop. One of them is used for shielding, and one of them is audio. And the audio one, I believe, I made a virtual ground by running through a 100 microfarad cap, not 100 microfarad, 100 nanofarad cap, just in series. And you can go crazier and do some Zeners and stuff, but I'm pretty sure that's shown on some of the schematics from the SVTs back then. I think it was 100 nanofarad. It might have been 47 nanofarad, but it was a pretty simple thing where that negative was coming on the multi-pin connector from the preamp board to the power section board, had that cap to ground to the chassis on the preamp side of things, and the shield between the two was just connected. But I'd have to go back and look at the videos to remember for sure. Sorry. Hey, Fletch is 40. I'm glad you made it. DBJ Fives. Thanks, man. Wow. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Dan Druff is I think a cat's gotten on your keyboard, dude. Look into that. Sebastian says he saw it in a video. John Sears singing prefers Habor. That's very possible. How do I think about the Ampeg J12 Jet? I tend not to. I don't know that I offhand remember that model specifically. I've had so many Ampegs in, which will all be called things like Jet or Jiminy, or I say it the old school way, Gemini, all that fun stuff. I have never in my life said Jiminy referring to Gemini. I don't know. Maybe I watched an astronaut video last week that just popped in there. Usually if I say Jiminy, I'm talking about cricket. But the circuits change so much. You get the Ampeg on your bench and you get the little paper schematic that was tucked on the back panel, and sometimes they match and sometimes there's no correlation, or the same model will have 3 different schematics in 2 years. It's really hard for me to keep track of what's what with the 60s Ampegs. I can explain the Tone Bender guitar pedal. It's a really nice fuzz. As in terms of telling you how it works, that would be a 30-minute answer, I think, out of fairness to everyone else. I'm sure that there are videos out there how fuzz pedals work, how the Tone Bender works. So I can't go off on too many very specific detailed tangents. Sorry. Fred, with your Sovtek MiG 50, low-level hum, regardless where the volume is, could be probably a ground problem and or the output transformer orientation, but without seeing the amp, I can't tell you. Calvin, I don't know any good tech in Montreal, sorry. But Chris Church in Toronto, or just outside Toronto, in Hamilton, might know someone in Montreal. He's all, find Chris Church at Church Audio, tell him I sent you, and see if he can make any recommendations for good tech in Montreal. Or maybe someone else here in Montreal can give you a recommendation. Hey, JBL. You got a Princeton reissue. Okay, so I worked on it a few years ago. It makes a loud pop when you turn it off, and now it's crackling at times. It's been a couple of years since I looked at it. You can bring it in. You can. The first thing to do is pull V1 and V3 in that amp. So you'll have the reverb driver and the phase inverter left, and see if it still crackles and pops. If it doesn't pop and crackle, then you probably just have a preamp tube. If it's crackling with just pretty much the phase inverter active, tap on the tubes lightly with your fingernail or a pencil. See if you hear it through the speaker. Text me after this, and we'll talk more. Ted Woodford is in Hamilton, Ontario, but he is a terrible amp tech. And he's also incredibly busy as far as emails go, Seth. But Chris Church is also in Hamilton. It's a good town to be in. Between Chris and Ted, all your guitar dreams are taken care of. I think Neil Peart was from there too. So something in the water. New old stock tubes, are they really worth it? Just bought a matched pair of 6v6s and one quickly went microphonic. No. New old stock are rarely worth it for most players. They're extremely expensive. There's no guarantee that expense will last. And you go to a gig and hit a pothole, you can kill a $400 new old stock the same way you can kill a $40 current production. But there are various brands of 6v6s, and some are more prone to going microphonic than others. And the amp, which may be fine in a combo, may be fine in a head, can be microphonic in a combo. I would find a vendor, a good tube vendor, and have a relationship with them and call them and say, hey, I've got a combo that uses 6v6s, and what have you had long-term success with? What's been a reliable tube for you? Let me try a pair of those. And if you have a problem with it, under the warranty period, they'll work with you. So that'd be the way to go. Hey, Bambule, I don't think it'd be blasphemous, but I think it'd be a lot more trouble than you think. If you go to a turret board, you're going to need to install standoffs for that turret board. And the turret board standoffs may be hard to put in the exact same locations that the holes for the old fiberboard were. And things, there's at least one of them is guaranteed to interfere with the filter cap board on the other side. Then you have the issue that the board needs to be X length, and a turret board of that length can be hard to get and expensive. Between the turret board and de-waxing the old one, there's also the option of looking on Mojotone and see if they sell a replacement fiber board for your amp, and also check HoffmanAmps.com, HOFFMAN, HoffmanAmps.com, and see if he's got one in his shop too. That would be an in-between, because you could put the new board underneath the old board and pretty much directly transfer the holes for the mounting screws with a pencil, and then repopulate it and put it in there. That'd probably be the way I would go, though. Only once have I had to do that. Only other time I've been able to de-wax and clean the board and then say, hey, it's all original but not stupid anymore. That's one of the reasons when the client's budget allows, I tell people 72 and earlier on the fenders to avoid that heavy wax, because the price difference in the amp can be made up for in the service cost. Hey, Sonny, if you want to take the solid-state rectifier out and replace with a tube, you probably do need to rebias. You're going to have a different bias if you go from solid-state to tube or vice versa. I don't know whether it will be an unsafe range. It will change. I don't know how much, because I don't know where it's set now. You may like the sound better, and it may be safe, but I would want to have that looked at and find out for sure, so you're protecting your investment. All right, cool. We're to the guitar bits. Sounds like a guitar, Paul Morgan says. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Well, it's good, because if it sounded like a flute, I'd have big problems. Hey, Tom K1TL. He's got a 65 Princeton reverb. He puts reverb above 6. It goes into oscillation, goes away when turned back to 5. Microphonic tube. It could be a microphonic tube. That'd be V3 in a Princeton. It could be a bad cathode bypass cap. It could be a bad filter cap. It could also be a bad reverb tank. So the cheapest things to do are to try different 12X7 and V3, and then try a different reverb tank. And if it's neither of those things, then it needs to go to a tech because it's either going to be the cathode bypass cap on the recovery stage where the wet and dry are mixed, or it's going to be a bad filter cap. There are a couple other things it could be, but those are the most likely. Hopefully it's just a tube or the tank. Hey, Clivey. Only the normal channel power section of a twin reverb for his pedal steel guitar. That's fine. And if you can use it with all the tubes in and just not using the vibrato channel at all. Or you could pull V2, V3, and V4 and V5 and just have the V1 and V6 if you wanted. You'd get a little bit more headroom from the B plus going up, but you'd very slightly raise the heater voltage on the preamp tubes, but not enough to matter. You would have no longer be sharing a cathode on V1B with V2B, so you get a little more gain and less headroom from that, but you'd have a little more B plus available. Play around with it. Mr. Al talking about the SG sounds like a Tele. That's the good thing about a good SG or a good Les Paul is that there is a crossover with a Telecaster. It can sound like a Telecaster that can hit a little bit harder. I love that. Gary Bertola says, I own a Rivera Venus 6. Any thoughts on his amp? I don't have any experience with that model. I'm sorry. Rivera makes good products. The Riveras I've played have not been my cup of tea, purely from a voicing perspective, but they're very, very well built. VHT, if it's the Fryette era, that's a great amp. Pitbull 50, that's a beast. Thank you, Elbow James. I love that SG. Thank you, guys. Yeah, it's pretty, and with this color temperature light, that red really does its thing. It's hard to show without getting that because of the angle. But I'm not doing this to say, hey, look at my cool gear, but we all like looking at guitars, right? We all like pretty things, and this is a very pretty thing. I love the way the grain on this goes. It just kind of flows. It looks like it's a one-piece body, which would be rare for a Gibson USA, but I think it might actually be. If it has a seam, I've not found it yet. It took forever to get that damn thing to play in tune, but it was worth it. And I had so many people tell me, why are you doing that? Why don't you just do this? Well, just put a roller bridge on it. Roller bridges don't sound the same. If you like a roller bridge, that's great. It doesn't sound the same. I've got nylon saddles on that. I'm not going for what's, better. I'm going for what's cool, man. And it plays in tune just fine now after a lot of work. Bridge pickup sounds better when you roll off the tone. Yeah, that's the entire point. You just roll that back, and then all of a sudden they balance. Now, playing through this amp, I noticed I would want to raise the bridge pickup a little bit. That's the trouble. I keep playing through different amps every time, and I have not quite gotten this bridge pickup the exact right height yet. I know that it's like a quarter turn away from being great through every amp, but some amps have less headroom, and so it's tricky. Hey, Kyle Ray, I have no thoughts yet on Rev tones. I saw tone in the next post on Rev amps. I've heard nothing but good things about them, but I have not had one here. I've not even heard one in person. Neither have I had one in to go through and see how they're built. So until I have one that goes on the bench that I can look through and say, yes, this is a good thing, I recommend this, I don't have any real thoughts on them. What brand of shielded wire do I use on the input grids? Hey, Chris, I don't really have a brand because I buy that stuff in surplus from Apex Junior. I don't know who makes it. I use 22 interconductor, 22 gauge interconductor stranded that then has a Teflon jacket that then has a shield at that point. The one I have right now is a braided shield. The one I had before, which I kind of preferred, was a spiral, and then that has a plastic jacket outside of that. Actually, the one before was plastic. This new one is Teflon again. The important thing to me is that the interconductor is 22 gauge, because 26 and 28 gauge interconductors that you'll find on a lot of shielded stuff breaks in an amp. It's just too small to handle being vibrated. Hey, Peter Mancuso, I appreciate it. Thank you. Is there a Y? Is there a Y to connect two heads to one cab simultaneously using the stereo mode on the cab? You can, if you're using stereo mode, that's dual mono essentially. You can use 2 amps into one cab. You may get a ground loop because you'd have 3 ground paths. You'd have the shared ground within the speaker cab, you'd have the AC ground from the power cables, and you'd have the audio grounds. So if you're running into 2 different amps, hopefully you'd have a splitter box that isolates one output going to the second amp, so then your only common ground would be the mains power, the AC, in which case you could rewire the cabs, hopefully, so that they have, each side has only one ground connection rather than having a shared joined ground within the cabinet. Though the current in the speaker negative might be minor enough that you wouldn't notice any difference there, but in theory. But yeah, as long as each head connected to one half of the cab does not exceed the wattage rating of the speakers, you should be okay. I'm not sure it's everyone's cup of tea, but it should work. You could also alternate. You could use one 2x12 or one 4x12 cab with 2 different mics and 2 heads, and there's your A, there's your B. I recommend selling Blues Juniors. I don't think upgrading them is an honest. I don't think that me talking about upgrading your Blues Junior is an honest discussion, because you'll be doing work to prolong the inevitable. The only fix for them is to replace the entire board that has all the tube sockets on it. And my buddy Brad at Brad's Guitar Garage makes a very nice replacement PCB for that, but it's a lot of money to throw into the damn thing. You could buy a real amp for that much money. Blues Junior is one of the worst things that has ever been done to guitarists, and guitarists love them. They like, hit me again. Thank you, Daddy. Ugh, I can't believe I said that on the internet. It's just gross. The Pro Junior, the Blues Junior, the Hot Rod, the Blues Deluxe, all these things. It's insulting that Fender keeps taking a crap on people, and they line up for more. Kind of gross myself out. Anyway, I don't have an experience with too many Mojo Tone speakers. I've tried some that I like a lot, and I've tried some others that sounded pretty good, but I've not tried all of them, so I have a limited knowledge. I would expect, given how much money Mojo Tone is putting into that and how crowded the market is, that they're probably hedging their bets and only releasing stuff that they like. So probably really well worth trying. Hey, just in case, I would be willing to answer your rather lengthy question on coupling caps. I asked earlier in a comment, if I remember. Thanks. I do remember that you asked, and that I said I would answer in a stream if you asked in the stream, but I don't remember the specifics now. I remember saying, yeah, no problem, I'll do that. if you can give me a reminder, or maybe it'll come to me. I just can't remember right now. Hey, Jeff Meckerlane, thanks for joining us, man. What cap do I recommend to put across the negative bias pot resistor to reduce noise? Thank you. I don't put it across the negative bias pot resistor. I'm talking specific on the AB763 and similar circuits where there is the bias pot is used as a true variable voltage potentiometer rather than just a variable resistor, by which I mean that in a Marshall or a basement, it's just a variable resistor. And it's just using it's only using 2 of the 3 lugs. 2 of the lugs are joined together for safety's sake, but it's just using it as a variable resistor as opposed to a potentiometer where all 3 lugs are used. And in the AB763 style with the true potentiometer bias pot, I'm putting a cap from the wiper to ground with the positive end of the cap at ground, the shell of the pot. And I use a 22 microfarad 63 volt, and because that's what I stock, I use the Vishay 021 ASM, I think it's called, series. But if you have the MODs, if you have Sprague Adams, if you have a handful of radial caps, any of them will work. But it goes from the wiper to ground, not across the, let's call it the tail resistor. I'm trying to remember just in case. I will get to it, I promise. Hey, Jim Cavosi, thank you very much. Can't determine why he can't get matched KT66s with the Metropolis kit to match better than 5 or 6 milliamps. First of all, 5 or 6 milliamps is really good. That may be as good as the KT6s are matched. The other issue could be you may have a very small amount of DC leaking from a phase inverter output coupling cap. Depending on how the kit was built, what caps were used. If they're 400 volt caps, you might have a tiny little bit of leakage, just nudging one of them off. Without your amp in front of me, I cannot tell you. But unless it starts going, it starts at 5 or 6 milliamps and then goes to 10, then goes to 20 over a period of a week, 6 is really good. If it keeps changing and increasing, you either have a bad tube, possibly a conductive socket, or there's a problem with the output coupling caps, like I said. Hey, Shane says, looks like an Omega Speedmaster, one of the best watches on the planet. It sure does look like one. It's a $100 Pagani. It's a $100 Pagani with an $80 Uncle Seiko straps. So this is a reproduction of the Omega band from 1971, and this is an homage to a Speedmaster. But instead of $7,000 to $10,000, it cost me about $170 total. And it's a quartz, so it actually keeps better time. I can't justify a $7,000 watch. That's crazy. I'd take that money and buy a whole bunch of guitars or go on vacation with. I wouldn't buy a $7,000 watch. Because someone else could come up to me with a machete and say, now it's my $7,000 watch. Anyway, but thank you. Yeah, look from a distance of more than 6 inches, it looks just like the big expensive one. So I may need a machete too. Thanks, Fletcher's 40. Appreciate that very much. Very kind of you. And Captain Fineweather. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you don't have to do the cap across the plate resistor since you have a cathode follower in your C1. That's good. You've got the better amp already. You're not stupid. You've got the better amp. That's a perfect place to be. Sent to me. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That's so nice of you. Let's see. Thanks, T777. Appreciate that very much. Well, we're going to take another... Oh, okay. We got 7 minutes. I can't take another... I guess I could take an intermission now. Sorry, my back teeth are floating. Let's take Fletcher's 40 question first because he gave me that nice super chat. Mind if I resurrect the issue from a couple weeks back? The Epiphone BC30, bad hum in 15-watt mode. Amp uses a pair of 5081s in the output section, and the 15-watt mode grounds out the grids. To run this as a tube in triode mode. I don't think it grounds out the grids to run in triode mode. I don't remember seeing a schematic. Did you put it in the comments to that thread? In which case it's going to be hidden. YouTube hides any link posted not by me or my moderators. So I don't know. I can't imagine that they ground out the grids to go to triode mode. They would, to go to triode mode, you would shunt the plate to the screen. So basically, it's got a triode mode, and there's a bad hum in triode mode. Based on my other experience with similar amps like that, if it's cathode bias, which probably is to do that, they probably don't have any screen grid resistors, and so when it's in a triode mode, it's noisy. It hums. And if you look at the video 6 months ago or so on the very expensive Tone King Sky King, they did the same thing with 6L6s or 34s, I don't remember. Much louder amp, cathode bias, pentode triode mode. Triode hummed like a, and the partial solution was adding some screen grid resistors even in triode mode. Duh. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of triode mode in general. All right, now we're going to take that 7-minute break. I will see everyone back in 7 minutes. Thank you very much. All righty, let's get back into it a little bit early. So if anyone's still in the kitchen or whatever, I apologize. Just have a lot of people here and try to answer some questions. I'll try to do a little speed run. Let's see. Thank you very much, Colby Jack. That's appreciated. You don't need to do that. You got me like 3 months worth of barbecue already. Might do that on Tuesday. Rick Erickson is awesome. Rick's great. He's the guy who's telling you guy who does all the work for Pearl Jam. Did all the work for Heart. He designed the flanger Roger Trout used on Barracuda. So whether you know it or not, you've been hearing Rick Erickson's work probably as long as most of us have been alive, and he is still sharp and a great guy. You're in good hands, Colby Jack. Thanks so much, Elbow James. Appreciate that. I always feel like the commentary when let me take off the overlapping thing. When I'm doing the long form videos especially, I'm kind of filling space. I always feel like I'm saying stupid stuff. Yeah, the AC15C1 is heavy. I wish it were a lighter cab or that there was a lightweight replacement cab that fit it. But for the price, there's not a better amp on the market. Let's see. Yeah, see, Gooden's right. I mean, there's so many versions of the Jet, it's hard to have an opinion of the Jet. Some of them are really great. Some of them can be made great. It's fun. Thanks, Saturn910. I appreciate that. I'm not a big fan of negative feedback switches, but some people really like them. I think it's more interesting to play with the tone stack and mids and such. But, that's a subjective argument. Not saying that you're wrong. I'm more right. I'm the guy with the mic, so I'm right. That's how the world works these days. Emmett Otter, very good. Well, if the bourbon is pouring freely, that might have a correlation with the gout that you say has subsided. And if the bourbon's pouring too freely, would you even know if the gout has subsided? Maybe the gout's still there and you just don't give a damn. Hope you're feeling better, man. Thanks. Thanks, Greg G. Appreciate that. Yeah, the world of solder wick, of desoldering braid, there are a lot of products that don't do squat, or they don't tell you this, but you're supposed to use that and a little flux pen at the same time. It becomes a pain in the butt. The tech spray stuff, the number 4 no clean that I use, and you can find this stuff in the descriptions for like every video from the past year. It's got all this kind of stuff, including camera stuff if you're interested in that, but all the soldering stuff and the tools I most often use. That stuff is fantastic. It works so well. And Tom K1 TL asked the reverb oscillation question twice. I'm not singling you out, Tom, but to anyone, if you ask a question, please only ask it once, because I will get to it. I try to do them in sequence, and if you ask it again, I think, I've lost my place. I scrolled back up by mistake. I have very little experience with Engel and very little thought on them. I've said this in a lot of streams. Just don't get a lot of Engels in this part of North America. I don't know whether there aren't any or whether they're all so good that they're bulletproof, but I have some European tech friends who have said less than kind things about them. So I don't have an opinion of my own. But if I were a gambling man, I would not put any money on buying an Engel. Hey, Devin, that's one of the reasons I do this, Jeff Mackerlane, thanks for joining us, Jeff. Hopefully you're still here as I'm talking to you now. A lot of times when, by the time I see you're here and say anything, other than earlier I did say, hey, I'm afraid that you're gone. But yeah, I enjoyed your vintage guitars video today. I wish I could afford to play that game, but it looks kind of cool. This looks like a 64 SG, like this looks like an Omega, and this keeps good time and this keeps good tone. So that said, I played a bunch of those USA ones, and I've made a lot of changes to it, and I'm able to make changes to a guitar that are expensive for people who cannot do what I can do. And I'm not holding myself up to the level of Brad or Ted. I'm not a full luthier. I have It's my skill set, and I know where it stops, but it certainly includes changing tuners, making changes to nuts, saddles, intonation, and general setup and truss rods and stuff. If this thing needed a refret or to have the board replaned, I would not be doing that myself. Hey, Jojo, yes, there are devices to switch back and forth. I would look to Radial, Radial. They will have good devices for that. That you need to be sure that you are giving the amps a load at all times, and that the two amps never talk to each other, so to speak, so that the two output transformers never see each other. And you can do this the right way, which is complicated, and Radial will do that, or you can do it the wrong way, and you can blow shit up. So saving money is not actually going to save you any money. Find what Radial sells, and if that's what you want to do, that's the price you pay, because if you cheap out, you'll pay a lot more in the long term. I'm just saying this because it's worth saying. Good in post, it can be difficult to have a meaningful relationship with a tube vendor because relationships don't exist in a vacuum. Wish I still had my drums. Thanks, Shaza. Appreciate that. Hey, thank you for the compliment. No, I don't have time. Basically, I do these things on Saturday, every other Saturday pretty much, and then I do the videos. And when I do things like this, that means I stay up 3 hours later today to get back to work. And when I spend an extra 45 minutes filming something than it would have taken me just to do it, that means I'm having to stay up later. And that 45 minutes extra does not get billed to the client. So, I cannot be all things to all people, and I'm sorry. I do appreciate it, though. Yeah, this guitar does look cool. I don't like the bat wing one, the one that goes up here, more the Angus thing. I love this one. It's funny, most people who get an SG are into Black Sabbath, or they're into AC/DC. I am into the Beatles' Revolver, George Harrison, and later Badfinger, which was the same guitar. And I'm into Wilco, and I'm into Tom Petty and Mike Campbell, and I'm into the Jayhawks. And this guitar does all that stuff. And I love the mixture of the very traditional stuff, never mind the tuner right now, so the old headstock and all that, and then this kind of jet age, modern sculpture, mid-century modern thing. It's just such a weird blend of futuristic and Art Deco and Art Nouveau and, something Orville would have recognized, so to speak. It shouldn't work, but it does. Sorry, I need to answer questions, but I love talking about guitars. When working on an amp, can it damage the amp to turn it on without the tubes plugged in? What about the speaker? It depends. Everyone's favorite answer. If you have an amp which has, say, 500 volt capacitor rating, and with no power tubes installed, the power goes up to 520 volts, you may damage the amp, though there'd be so little current being drawn that you'd probably be okay. But if the voltage, the unloaded voltage, were to creep up much above that, you could damage your capacitors. And if you plug it in without any tubes in it, you don't have to have the speaker connected because there's nothing going to go to the output transformer. There's no primary load, so there won't be any secondary load. Don't take that as gospel. That's a summary. But if I power up that Super Reverb without the power tubes, it does not need to be connected to a speaker. Most of the time when I'm working on an amp in that situation, I might have it connected to a dummy load anyway, just out of habit. But the main thing to watch is just what is the B plus with no tubes present, and what is the maximum rating of the capacitors in your amp. Because if you exceed that, that's a problem. Hal is here. Hopefully, he is listening and will know to come on in the house rather than wait for me to reply to his text, which I'm not going to do right now. Hey, Devin Marina. So hopefully Hal will be coming in here, and maybe he'll take this SG for a spin for you guys, or maybe that telly right next to it. Hey, Ed Riley. Did I say thank you to Devin Moreno? Devin, thank you very much. That's very much appreciated. Ed Riley, thank you very much. I have nothing but dislikes for 90s Vibro Kings. That era, Fender has got insane layouts with terrible grounds, ground loops everywhere, big, heavy, crazy grounds going places. It's just the worst of every possible design, and the amps are, as a result, really noisy. Come on in! Sorry about that. Hey, come on in here, buddy. Leave the amp out there and come on in. Dual gang 500K pots used for everything. Hal's making out with the dog before he comes in here. So they're just crappy. I'm sorry. They're horrible. I have only heard good things about Headstrong amps. I've not had one in front of me. I have seen photos of how they're built, and they seem to be built pretty much how I would build that amp for that price point. I think they're probably great, and I think I'll defer to Zach Childs and JD Simo on that. They both play them, and they also play that model specifically. So I imagine they're pretty damn good. Here comes Hal. Hey, Hal, come in here, make your debut, live debut. He's been on the channel a little bit. Come on in, man.
All right, good to see you. All right.
Let me get guitar off your back.
All right, yes, that's
You want the SG or you want to tell it?
I don't know. I want to tell you.
All right.
Am I actually going to play something?
Yeah, I got.
Oh crap! I wasn't ready for
that.
that.
Cable going to the Super Reverb. Hey, right there.
Okay.
If you got to be on the channel, you got to pay for play for your supper.
Okay, fair enough. Hello, psionic audiophiles.
I like that.
Yeah, I just made that up. So. These are the Murrays, right?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
not the new bridge though. That's the old bridge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got the new ones in the mail. Just haven't had time to install. That one sounds good.
What did you do?
What do you mean?
Different. You said it's a new bridge. What did you do?
No, pickup.
Oh, the new bridge pickup. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's the first one he sent me. I've got two new ones. But I talked to him about some changes. That's the first one. That one's just really good.
All right.
I have higher hopes for the next two. So.
Okay. He is sending me my other neck pickup, which is like this. It's on the way.
Right. So we're gonna be doing more of this telly stuff for you guys.
Yeah, because that's what I'm into. So yeah. And we're in the Super Reverb?
Yep.
Okay, not my amp over there. I see it.
I'll turn it
Is there anything in particular you want here?
Nah, just
Okay.
I figured to let people hear you noodle.
All right, yeah. That Strat, I haven't been... All right, let me tell everybody about this. Lyle, you've seen some of his videos. He did a black Strat for me. It's fantastic. I have this other Strat that I haven't liked ever since he did that. So now I've brought that over to him, so I'm going to have to buy him a few lunches to get him to work on that one. So we'll see how it goes.
Twist away.
Hey, there we go.
All right.
I'll let you get back to it. You got a bunch of questions here. I don't want to.
Yeah, I gotta get to this question.
All right, here. Let me get out of your
I'll
way.
call you after this. We'll talk about your guitar and the
Later, y'all.
deluxe.
I had the blessing of living in the same city as Lyle. Otherwise, we would all be in a desert of terrible tone. So it's a great thing.
Thanks, man. See ya.
All right, take care. See you.
Your check's in the mail.
Oh, yeah. All right, I'm saying hi to Bella on the way out.
Yeah, you better.
Yeah, Bella. What do you got there?
Hal's pretty awesome. At least my dog thinks so.
My deluxe is in here.
All right, see you, man. It makes it a lot easier for me to do the amp stuff when I got players like Hal and Steve and Logan and a guy and all coming through. Let's see. Yeah, the reverb tank is the same. I'm not a big fan of the stock tank, which is a what's the word? Belton. Now Belton makes great tube sockets. They make crappy reverb tank with bad connectors. My favorite tank for that amp is the Mojotone medium decay tank. Pardon me, coffee, as opposed to the long decay. Now, the vintage amps came with a long decay tank, but the trick is the new production long decay tanks have a longer, darker decay than the original long decay tanks. And the current MOD and Mojotone medium decay tanks sound more like the old Gibson Accutronics long decay, and they also aren't as dark. So that's my recommendation. And of the two, MOD is pretty good, but I prefer the Mojotone branded one. I think they're made in the same factory to different spec. The Marshall Origin 20 is not as badly built as the Blues Junior. It has better pots, has a better input jack. It's less likely to catch on fire. But it's a trick question because the Blues Junior sounds really good until it starts to die. And once it dies, it's heat-related death, and so it's kind of permanent. The Origin 20 is very unlikely to catch on fire, but it never really sounds that great. And if you use the master volume, then it sounds terrible. I don't know why they designed that circuit that way. They just did the stupidest of the stupid. So hey, there's a cool Marshall-y kind of gain sound. Turn the master volume down so you can play it in your apartment, and it cleans up and sounds fizzy. So do you want the thing that sounds really good till it dies prematurely, or you want the thing that might last but will never really sound good? So I'm not sure which is the greater sin. I can occasionally do custom order amps, T777. Contact me. I don't want to do another deluxe reverb. I don't want to do another Marshall. I don't want to do another straight Vox, but I would be interested in doing something truly custom. Benson amps are really good. I've had one in. I don't recall what was wrong with it other than it was well built and it was pretty easy to fix. So, you know. Hey, Dr. Z. Sorry, 331B. My Dr. Z amp head lives in my attic that can get hot in the summer. Is that a problem? Probably not, as long as it's not incredibly humid or incredibly cold in the winter. As long as the Tolex doesn't get too hot and start to crack or anything, or if the whole thing get filled up with spiders, the heat, even in a very hot attic, is less than the heat generated from the tubes. It's probably not the best idea in the world, but it doesn't necessarily mean that anything's gonna die. So I would say it's not recommended, but it's probably not a nightmare. Let's see. So trying to scroll down. Okay, right, Justin, is about perceived difference in tone between ceramic and polycaps. There are places in the circuit where the voltage is higher, and there are places in the circuit where the voltage is lower. In general, you have to look, this applies to resistors and capacitors. You have to look at what's the amount of amplification here, how many subsequent stages of amplification, and how much noise will this introduce versus a perceived tonal benefit. For example, if I were building, say, a deluxe reverb for someone, and I wasn't trying to make it just like a 1964, I would probably use I might use a 2-watt metal film plate resistor for V1A. That does the initial heavy lifting. That gets it from the signal from guitar level to a high level. There's an awful lot of amplification in that first stage. And then after that, it goes to the tone stack and the volume potting. And so what's fed to the next stage isn't is attenuated. But any noise introduced in that first gain stage will be amplified by the second stage, and in the reverb channel, the vibrato channel, the third stage, and the phase inverter. So any noise you introduce at the beginning will get amplified again and again and again. But the signal coming in does not distort the first tube. That first triode that does all that amplification barely distorts at all. If I were to slam it with a Les Paul signal, it would clip a little bit, but not a lot of distortion coming out of that. So I'm not going to get much benefit from using a carbon comp there. So I'll go for, say, a 2-watt metal film and have like as little noise as possible. And then that hot signal comes out of the tone stack and through the volume pot, feeds the second stage. And that second stage is where we have perceived gain, and we will begin to have overdrive and clipping and distortion characteristics, even at the point where the signal still is viewed as clean from a playing perspective. If you looked at it on the scope, that signal is distorting. And that's where you can get some benefit from using a carbon comp or a carbon film over a metal film. But you are only introducing it there with its slightly higher noise floor there, where the previous stage, where the noise floor is really critical, you're using the quietest thing. Same for capacitors. If a capacitor has got quite a bit of voltage across it, you're more likely to hear differences between it and a different type. I'm saying the same value, saying different material types. If you're in a tone stack and there's, or say a bright cap on a volume pot after tone stack, there's no DC present there. You're not going to hear much difference in that bright cap. But in a same type of cap, say ceramic versus polypropylene versus polyester versus what have you. If you have that same value cap being used as a coupling cap, like say the 470 picofarad coupling cap on the brilliant channel of a Vox, that's got 200 to 300 volts on one side of it, that's where you'll hear difference. You can change that out for different types and hear slight differences. The other thing I found, and I don't know why, is that there are more differences between materials as the size of the capacitor decreases. So if you're talking 220 picofarad caps, 500 picofarad caps, 1 nanofarad caps, there's going to be more of a perceived difference, at least in the amplifier circuits I work on most of the time, between different cap materials than there would be in, say, 100 nanofarad. Now, granted, with 100 nanofarad, you're not going to have too many ceramic discs out there. But so if the voltage on the cap is high and the value of the capacitor is somewhat low, you'll hear more of a perceived difference. And then there's a lot of minor differences, which are almost to the point where you can barely hear them individually, but cumulatively it can make a difference. I have found that an amp with 716Ps versus the same circuit done with all with 715Ps versus the same circuit done with all with Mallory 150Ms, even if they were to all have 22 nanofarad caps, there's going to be a slight difference. And it's even if you were to go through and make sure that all the capacitors have the exact same capacitance, there's a slight difference at the end of that chain. But when you make changes like this, the earlier in the path you could do it, the more it affects the total sound of the amp. If you were to do everything metal film and everything polypropylene caps until the output, and then just do things on the phase inverter plates, you may not hear any difference at all. So beyond that, I'd have to talk to you in person. Let's see. Yeah, Martin, the watch theft thing. I won't be. I don't think I'll even be wearing a look-alike when I go to London, just in case. Let's see. Hey, Natas. Yield 34 glows for a minute before losing glow after I powered amp on for 1 minute. But okay. Oh, we try this again. Glows for a minute, loses glow after powered amp for 1 minute. All right, you've got a blown fuse, sounds like. I think you need to look into your fuses, Natas. It's almost got to be the fuse, unless it. Yeah, you could have an intermittent fuse. It's not very common, but it does happen. Clint, sorry. I'll keep working at it. I'm very, very sorry. Anybody want a peanut? I also have a Rivera Venus 6, Colby Jack says. It's great when it's working correctly. It's got hiss and crackle. Huh. That's the amp in question. Well, Rick will sort you out on that, man. So. Hey, Howitzer. Thank you very much. How to know when to change a tube. When we have noise, or it's microphonic, or nothing works. The leading symptoms, I think the best answer is for you to watch a bunch of my troubleshooting or initial inspection videos, because I'll run into that an awful lot. The vacuum tube testers from Amazon are going to be garbage. There are good vacuum tube testers out there, but they're not going to be on Amazon. And most people won't know how to use a tube tester. And I don't think it's worthwhile for most end users to have tube testers. Most end users need to have a relationship with a good vendor. So Tube Depot, the Tube Store, Eurotubes, et cetera, et cetera. Not Amazon. Hey, Brienne. Howdy from the Pacific Northwest. The power transformer of Silvertone 1484 is really undersized. How might changing it out for something like a deluxe change the character? Are you talking about the output transformer? Okay. Sorry. For some reason, I saw the PT. I thought power transformer. Power transformer is really small in those because they use a voltage doubler. So it doesn't have to have a lot of voltage, just has to have a good bit of current. The power transformer really is undersized on those. So yeah, I would. It's a pair of 6L6s, fixed bias. I would probably look at a Baseman or super power, output transformer if it would fit. A deluxe output transformer is going to be optimized for 6 V6s. So in fact, but there is Mercury makes a beefed up output transformer for that model, which fits the footprint. That would be probably the best option. But if that's out of your price range and it physically would fit, I would look at a Habor or Hammond for a Super or Pro or Baseman. That would be a good choice for that. I'm glad that your Supremo Jazz Rock is rock solid. Thank you, Jimmy Mack. You better hurry back. Thanks, man. Very happy with this top hat. I'm very glad to hear that. So is Brian. Yeah, the Royale is nice. I like it a lot. I'm not a fan of how he implemented the master volume, but Brian and I had a friendly argument about that, and he's sticking to his guns, and I'm not going to argue with him anymore. But I don't like the way it cleans up when you turn it down, but it's not nearly as bad as some other amps. And overall, it's worth the price per mission, even with that one little thing. I've not been in an Amplexador. If anyone has an Amplexador that needs service, I'll be glad to service it, but not a lot of top hats in the world in general. And I think the Amplexador is a fairly recent model, so the statistically it just hasn't come in yet. Let's see. Let's see, Robert Diaz here. I have an Electro-Harmonix Ambitron pedal. I've never heard of that. Unfortunately, it's a Type-In plug, 3 round pins. With use of adapter damage, the pedal doesn't need a step-up-down transformer. I don't know. I don't know what power it uses. I know that I would contact Electro-Harmonix and ask. I'm unfamiliar with that model. and have no idea what power it needs. Typically, you can have AC or DC, and then it's going to have an amount, 12 volts, 9 volts, whatever. And if it's DC, it's going to be tip positive or tip negative. And beyond that, how those connections are made are separate. So you could have a 3-pin connector or a 2-pin connector. With 3-pin connector, it sounds like you might have a grounded AC. So I would contact Electro-Harmonics. Sorry. I cannot pretend to know everything. Yeah, it can, but it won't have any signal if the output tubes aren't present. So it'll be just a static thing. It won't be a problem. I don't have time to get into it or cite things, but there's not going to be a problem if you don't have power tubes. Put it this way. Pull the output tubes in your amp with the speaker connected. Power it on. Listen. Nothing comes out of the speaker. It's not a thing. But if it makes you feel better, hook up to a speaker. Well, Steve Resendez, thank you very much. Shoot me an email, and hopefully I'll be able to fit you in. I'm behind the 8 ball constantly, but I'd love to. I'd love to fix more Fenders. I think I'm now to the point where Hal was coming in. He's such a nice guy. I'm not saying that because he's my client. He's actually become a friend. It's funny because we're very different people living very different lives, but we really get along well. It makes me very happy. He's a little more country than I am, and he'd say that. He says Tremolo. Got that Fender Tremolo. He's very country. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I've heard about Ingalls. Sorry. S. Pumpstein has warned people away from them, so yeah. A tone oasis. I like that. Unless it's just a mirage. Thanks, Brian. Hey, Victor, cool. All right, let me know what you think of Ben's pickups. I think you'll enjoy it. Hey, Clivey, good. Right on the same page with you. So you'll get a little more headroom from this, a little less from that. It's a different thing, but I like it. Hey, Kent Jackson, thank you very much. 30-year sitting, dirty but good condition. They're great amps. Don't power it on if you can help it without a tech looking through it first. If it's sat for 30 years, those caps could be on the verge of exploding. They could be real dried up, and you apply power and the main thing that goes wrong with those is, besides tubes and filter caps, is the output board has a bias circuitry and stuff in it, right where the output tubes, right next to the output tubes. And their fiber board, it's just like Fender used in the Fender amps. And over time they curve, and all the resistors are mounted against the curve. So when that board warps, those resistors break free of their solder joints. So I would take that to a tech and have them reflow those solder joints and make sure it's safe, or possibly change out the filter caps. But there's nothing wrong with the Music Man HD 130. They're very loud, very clean. Mac Flying V, I'll look for you, Andy. Thank you very much. I'm actually not taking amp work through Martin Music anymore. I've been kind of moving more in this direction, but I will find your Mac Flying V email and get you my address. I'm still taking work. I'm just not doing it through the local music store. Kent, I don't know the answer to that about non-subscriber. You may not be signed into Google on your computer or however it works. Yeah, sometimes it'll unsign us, which drives me nuts sometimes. Clivey, that's too big a subject for this stream. My buddy Brad's Guitar Garage, that's two for the person who said I need to say it 3 times like Beetlejuice. He had a video 2 nights ago where he's designing a PCB, and he goes through and talks about a lot of that kind of stuff in real time during his live stream. So Brad's Guitar Garage, go to his channel, like, subscribe, because I said so, and it's awesome. And he's got a video just on that subject where he spends like 2 hours talking about that. And Brad is right about everything except hairstyle choices. Hey, Robert, 2 questions. Got a deluxe reverb. How to repair a strip of Tolex on the top edge seam? Anything to be aware of with known issues? As far as the Tolex repair, I'd have to see it. Some of it you can, if it's just a small little strip, is it missing or is it torn? I've got some videos where I show gluing Tolex down, but they're not torn rips or anything or gaps. They're just flaps. Sometimes you just got to live with a road-worn relic amp. As far as known issues with the 2013 Deluxe Reverb, look through my various Fender reissue. I have playlists, so all the Fender reissues are in a playlist, and there's a lot of videos on how to make those things more reliable. Devin Moreno, sorry, I've not had a Milkman in. I've heard mixed things about them, and I'm not sure how many of their amps are tube versus how many are hybrid. I know they have some digital or solid-state stuff too, but I've not really looked into it that much. Sorry. Thank you, William. I appreciate that. If you think I'm doing God's work, then you missed my dirty joke earlier in the stream. It was dirty even for me. It was almost accidental. Kind of took me by surprise. But the one thing I've been told is that God is very forgiving. So I guess it is. Hey, stupid Dooley. Any thoughts on THD amps? Yeah, I had a univalve back in the day. That was a good amp, and the bivalve was a good amp. I've never tried any of their bigger ones, but Andy Marshall designed some really good amps with some really good PCBs, and the hot plate is I think still a great product. He had some really nice speakers and cabs too. I'm not quite sure what happened there, and I used to be friends with Ed, who was involved in THD amps, and he's a hell of a player. He plays those V-gear things with the slanted frets and metal necks and all that stuff. Real shredfest kind of guy, but he's a cool, crazy German, and we like crazy Germans around here. I have nothing but good thoughts about THD amps, but I've not played all of them. Hey, Andy Talamantes, I'm glad you got a Royale Mark II after watching the video. I need to call Brian and get some kickbacks. That's the thing. People are like, oh, he hates everything. He's a downer. No, when something's good, I say it's good. Germino, Sir, Friedman, Top Hat, Swart. I'd love for the list to just get longer and longer and longer as people know what's good and what's bad and stop buying the bad and reward the good, including when it's just like a Vox AC15 C1 that if you can pick it up, you can pick it up for like $500. Let's see. Hey, Brienne again. I have on the 1484 switched from 6V. Oh, you've changed to 6V6. Yeah, you can try a deluxe reverb transformer. If you got 6V6s, that'd be fine. Should be pretty easy. You can even just temp one in, make sure it works and you like the sound before you solder it or drill it. Steve Resendez says, howdy, Lyle. What is your favorite amp to work on? Howdy, Steve. How are you doing? My favorite amp to work on from a perspective of having achieved something would probably be the beat-up Fenders, like that Rusty Bassman or old 50s Tweed models that have been abused, or JMI era Voxes, or Marshalls that seem to just be noise fests, where I know that these things have been gotten just a series of band-aids over the years by techs who just wanted to fix one thing, get paid, and get off their bench. And so by the time they get to me, they're on, seemingly on a death's door. Just this noisy thing will never be an amp again. And I love when I get the opportunity to take the time to go through and really get all the dirt out of all the grounds. And, the stuff you see me do, it takes a lot of time. It's boring work at the moment I'm doing it, but at the end when it's done, I suppose it's like restoring a car. At the very least, it's like detailing one. It's like, yeah, I'm doing a lot of stuff I don't enjoy doing, but that's satisfaction at the end. When that thing that used to do nothing but go, all of a sudden sounds like your favorite records. So it's not just one particular amp. Now, that's not at all the same thing as easiest amp to work on. Easiest amps to work on are pretty much any 60s Fender. If it's just a repair. If everything's fine, and hey, it was working last week and it stopped working, that's usually a really easy repair. But it's always about, a favorite is not always easy, at least for me. Hey, Mac and Tune, I'll look for your email. Thank you. I can't remember. I think I worked on one Polytune, but I don't remember the model, and it was over 10 years ago. Most of the jazz guys in Memphis used to use Polytunes, and they moved over to Princeton's. I don't know whether they all had a jazz guitar meeting and decided, but I just haven't seen anyone playing a Polytone out in a long time. So I don't remember which model it was. Sorry. It was built like a guitar pedal. I can help you with a 2016 Fuchs Jack, Black Jack. 15 years ago. And if I can't figure it out, I'm friends with Andy Fuchs, so we can get it sorted. But yeah, I'd be glad to look at your Princeton and your Fuchs. Shoot me an email. I'll look for Mac and Tune. Let's see. Thanks, Tanak. Hey, if you like the VibroChamp Reverb, you're not wrong. If you like it, that's great. I thought the reverb sounded like a digital reverb. I didn't understand why they put a digital card in there that's going to fail, and when the rest of it could have been just analog and last a long time. I thought it sounded okay. I thought the speaker wasn't great. If that amp can work without the reverb card, because that reverb card is going to die, because Fender never makes their DSP stuff last long, and they don't support it under warranty. They don't even carry replacements for more than like a year or two after the warranty expires. If that amp can still work without its reverb DSP stuff, would be a better consideration, but I don't know. I thought it was all right, but I think they missed a trick. They should have just offered a straight VibroChamp reissue, built like that one, like the VibroChamp Reverb reissues, because the build quality is actually higher in that than it is in the other reissue apps. It's a good design, and just admit that the digital stuff that's going to fail. That's not going to fail because it's digital. This is not some old man shouting at digital clouds. It's because it's poorly implemented cheap digital that they don't support, because that stuff is built cheaply and it will fail, and when it fails, they won't be able to sell you another one because they will have moved on to the next revision. And that's what Fender has done ever since they got on the digital train. But if you like the sound of it, it's a good amp. Now, Gooden, you already had one joke on the show. And after reading this one, you still only have one joke on the show. Go away with your mola. Yeah, you can switch two heads into one cab, not at the same time. You can't mix them into one cab. You can alternate between heads into one cab, or you can have two heads alternating or at the same time into two different sides of a stereo cab. You can't mix speaker levels. I mean, it's possible, but it'd be cheaper just to buy more cabinets. Thanks, Brianne. I don't think I'm a downer, but people sure don't like to hear bad things about the Emperor's duds. Well, Tom, you can find good prices on Fenders. You can find like Super Reverbs and Twins late 60s from like $600 and up. And even if they need $200 to $400 worth of work, you're looking at an amp for under $1,000 that would cost you $4,000 to buy new. Some of the things get crazy valuable. Right, like right now, you cannot buy a 60s or even 70s Princeton Reverb or Deluxe Reverb for less than $2,000, and those used to be $500 amps, like 5-10 years ago. But there are good deals to be found. And there's nothing wrong with the Fender 65 reissue series. You can get a 65 reissue amp used for $700. You spend $200 getting some filter caps changed out and a few reliability upgrades. A year later, you spend $75 for a better speaker. You got a real good amp. You're still under $900, under $1,000. 378 amps. Thank you very much. Got a problem with his number 32 amp. Dropping resistance between the first two B plus caps is getting super hot and produces smoke. It should drop 80 volts, but drops 150 volts. Tubes are okay. Number 31 amp. No idea what to check. What draws so much current? Well, it's going to be, I assume the second stage is your screen supply. You could, first of all, go for a walk, come back with fresh eyes, look at the wiring, make sure everything is wired correctly throughout the entire thing. You could have a bad filter cap. You could have a bad tube in the number 32 amp. You could have a leaky coupling cap in the phase inverter output, which is making the output tubes bias crazy, which throws off the screen supply. Something is drawing way too much current. Now, if it's happening in that first dropping resistor, it could be, it may be something in the other nodes, even though that's the resistor that's getting hot. It may not be the screen supply. It may be something grounding out in the phase inverter or preamp nodes, but because you're dropping resistors between those nodes are going to be like 10K or so, you're going to notice a problem in the first dropping resistor, because that dropping resistor would be like 500 ohms to 1K. Now, when you say the first two B plus caps, I'm assuming you mean from the power transformers, so your reservoir and your screen. If you mean, well, actually, you wouldn't have an 80 volt drop there. Typically, you'd have like 5 volts typically, unless you mean between the. If your number 1 and your number 2 are preamp nodes, if you have that issue, let me know. I don't know whether you're talking about the preamp drop or the reservoir and screen drop. Jimmy back, yeah, I think 1688 was cheap because it was designed for students. Look at they don't even use the full heater supply. If I were building a champ, I would go 33 22 22 or 30 20 20, because you don't want to have too much capacitance on the first stage to overload the 5Y3. But you can give it some more filtering. That 1688 was just done to be cheap. Hey, Simple Circuit. It's hard to say because not all speakers fit in all Silverface Vibrochamp cabs, or the Blackface, or the previous Tweed champ cabs. A lot of times the speaker might hit the power tube or the rectifier tube. what's the best way to put this? I think the one I like that fits every time I've tried is the G8C from Warehouse Guitar Speakers. I've tried some Webers I liked. I think it was the 8F something. So the 8-inch ceramic version, not the Alnico. The Alnico, the basket hits the tube. But it's really hard to know without having the cabinet in front of me where I can measure things. G10C is a fantastic speaker for a larger thing. Most Fiber Champs have an 8-inch, yeah. But they do have a G8C, which would be a good choice. And I believe it fits. Curtis Everett, how do I drain the caps in the Crate 3112 Club? They're radial and flush mounted on the chassis. You would do it from some other point in the cabinet, or you do it at the tube sockets, or you can do it old school. Have the amp on and making sound, and strum your guitar, unplug it from the wall, and then strum until you don't hear anything. That's going to drain. As long as you're not taking it in standby first, that'll typically drain all the caps at once. 378 amp says it's 22 microfarad, 10K, then 22 microfarad. So you're talking about the preamp nodes then, if you got a 10K, right? Are we talking about the preamp, or are we talking about the first two stages? And I view the first filtering stages as first filtering stages from the rectification. Hey Ed, I replaced the Nashville style threaded inserts in this with some studs that I got from Faber that give me 6x32 studs. So this is the old style bridge, old ABR, and it's going into actual wood-mounted studs now as opposed to the screwed inserts. I don't like those; they vibrate too much. All right, so choke. All right, 22 microfarad. $10K. All right, wait. The hot resistor is 10K. So you got a 10K resistor from what to the choke and the reservoir and the output transformer center tap? Okay, so using. I don't understand why you have a choke and a 10K resistor. I also don't understand why your reservoir cap is 22 microfarad, but your other, your preamp and your phase inverter are 100 microfarad. I would have to see your schematic, but email me. Yeah, I'll be glad to look at that. I promised my mother I would come out and run some errands with her. She's not feeling so good this week, so I'm going to wrap up about 6 minutes early. I really appreciate everyone being here. I think we got through almost all the questions this time, which is a rarity. So that's cool. We got that going for us, which is nice. Thanks for everyone for joining. Thanks for all the positive feedback on those very long videos this week. I hope everyone is well. Hope you have a good weekend. And I will see you all soon. Where's the button? There it is.